My name is Myra Atwood. I'm 32. Last Easter, my father walked to my purse in front of 18 family members, opened it, took out my grandmother's sapphire ring, the one she left to me by name in her will, and handed it to my sister. Jocelyn slid it onto her finger, smiled, and said, "Thanks, Dad." My mother nodded from across the table like this was just another holiday tradition. Nobody objected. Nobody flinched. 18 people watched my father hand away my grandmother's ring, and the loudest sound in that room was silverware settling on porcelain. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table, Grandma Vivian's chair. No one had sat there since she passed. The cushion was still creased the way she left it. I reached for my phone, dialed one number. My father's face changed before I even hung up. Before I take you back to that day, if this story speaks to you, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely feel it. And drop where you're watching from and your local time in the comments. I always read them. Now let me take you back 2 years before that Easter, the day my grandmother sat me down and put that ring in my hand. 4 years ago, I drove out to Grandma Vivian's house on a Tuesday afternoon. Granville, Ohio, small town, big trees, the kind of place where people still wave from their porches. She was 77, sharp as a tack, living alone in the same 3-bedroom colonial she'd kept since 1971. She met me at the door with coffee already poured. 2 cups, black, the way we both liked it. We sat at her kitchen table, the one with the chipped corner she refused to fix because Grandpa had done it carrying in the Christmas turkey in 1988. "I have something for you," she said. No build-up, no ceremony. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and set a small velvet pouch on the table. Inside was the ring. Oval sapphire, set in a thin gold band. It had belonged to my great-grandmother before it belonged to Vivian. She'd worn it every day for 40 years. "I want you to have this," she said. "Not because you need it, because you'll keep it." I turned it over in my palm. The gold was warm. I could still feel where her finger had shaped the band. "Why not Jocelyn?" I asked. Grandma Vivian looked at me, steady, clear, the way she looked at everything. "Because Jocelyn already gets everything she points at. This ring is for someone who keeps things." She closed my hand around it. "Take it home. Wear it, or put it somewhere safe. It's yours now. Has been since I decided." I didn't argue. When Vivian Grady made a decision, it stayed made. I drove home with the ring on my right hand. The sapphire caught the late afternoon light every time I turned the wheel. It felt like a small, quiet promise. I had no idea anyone would try to break it. A few months later, I wore the ring to a family dinner at my parents' house. Nothing special, just a Sunday pot roast, the 4 of us. I hadn't planned on making an announcement. The ring was on my hand. That was it. My mother noticed before the salad course. "Is that Mom's ring?" Donna set her fork down. Her voice carried that careful flatness she uses when she's already decided how she feels about something. "Grandma gave it to me," I said. "A couple months ago." Silence. My father kept cutting his meat. My sister checked her phone. "She gave it to you." Donna repeated it like she was testing whether the sentence would hold. "Yes." "Without asking anyone?" "It's her ring, Mom. She can give it to whoever she wants." Dinner continued, but the temperature at the table had dropped 10 degrees. Jocelyn didn't look up from her plate. My mother refilled her wine glass twice in 15 minutes. After dinner, my father caught me by the front door. Richard Atwood is 6'1", broad-shouldered, the kind of man who fills a doorframe when he wants to. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "That ring belongs to the family," he said. Low, even. My mother should have talked to me first. "She talked to me, Dad. And she gave it to me." His jaw tightened. "We'll see about that." He held the door open for me. I walked to my car in the dark, my hand instinctively closing around the ring. On the drive home, I told myself he was just surprised. that he'd come around, that a 77-year-old woman giving her granddaughter a ring wasn't something worth fighting over. I was right about one thing. It wasn't worth fighting over, but Richard Atwood didn't see it that way. 2 years after she gave me the ring, Grandma Vivian died. She was 79. Pancreatic cancer. Fast, merciless. The kind that doesn't negotiate. I was there most days toward the end. Drove out to Granville after work. Sat with her in the living room while the light changed through those tall windows she loved. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes I just read to her from the Agatha Christie paperbacks she kept on the nightstand. She'd close her eyes and nod along like she already knew who did it. Jocelyn visited twice. My parents came on Sundays, stayed an hour, brought flowers that wilted by Wednesday. The funeral was on a Thursday. Raining, of course. The will was read the following week at the office of Margaret Hale, Vivian's attorney, her executor, and her closest friend for 40 years. The ring was listed clearly. To my granddaughter, Myra Atwood, the sapphire ring previously gifted to her, confirmed herein as her sole property. My father sat across the conference table when Margaret read that line. He didn't object, not out loud. But afterward, in the parking lot, I heard him say to my mother. She was confused at the end. Myra influenced her. I was standing 12 feet away. He knew I could hear. Margaret Hale walked me to my car that day. She pressed a business card into my hand. Cream cardstock, simple font. Your grandmother asked me to give you this, she said. If anything ever happens with the ring, you call me, anytime. I looked at the card, looked at Margaret. Did she think something would happen? Margaret studied me for a moment. Vivian didn't leave things to chance. She left them to the right people. I tucked the card into my wallet, right next to the ring. 6 months after the funeral, Jocelyn got engaged. Trevor Marsh, insurance agent, decent guy, the kind who holds doors and remembers birthdays. They'd been dating 2 years. The proposal was at a vineyard. My mother cried on FaceTime. The call about the ring came 3 days later. Jocelyn needs something borrowed for the wedding, my mother said. Her voice had that rehearsed lightness, like she'd practiced the sentence in the bathroom mirror. Grandma's ring would be perfect. Vivian would have wanted it. The ring is mine, Mom. Grandma's will says so. You're not even engaged, Myra. What are you doing with it? Letting it sit in a drawer? I wear it. And even if I didn't, that's my choice. Silence. Then, you're being selfish. That night my father called. No pleasantries. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, he said. I'm not making it anything, Dad. I said no. That should be enough. It's a family ring. It's my ring. Grandma gave it to me. Her will confirmed it. I'm keeping it. He hung up. For 2 weeks, nothing. No calls, no texts, no Sunday invitations. I thought the silence meant they'd accepted it. That maybe my father had looked at the will, seen his mother's signature, and let it go. Then, the week before Easter, my mother texted, Family is family, Myra. We're past the ring thing. Come to Easter dinner. Uncle Ray will be there. Everyone misses you. Her voice was warm, conciliatory, the kind of tone that makes you second-guess every wall you've built. I said yes. I packed the ring in my purse the morning of Easter. I always carried it to family gatherings, Grandma Vivian's ring at Grandma Vivian's table. It felt right. It felt like bringing her along. I didn't know I was walking into an ambush. I should tell you something about growing up Atwood. When I was 16, my parents threw a birthday party for me, then canceled it the morning of because Jocelyn had a sore throat. Not the flu, not strep, a sore throat. We can reschedule yours, my mother said. We never did. At my high school graduation, my parents arrived 40 minutes late. They'd been driving Jocelyn to buy a dress for her junior prom, and the trip ran long. I walked across the stage, scanned the audience, and found one face. Grandma Vivian, front row, hands in her lap. She was the only one who clapped before I reached my seat. When I passed my CPA exam, 4 months of studying, 70-hour weeks, the hardest thing I'd ever done, my mother said, Good, now help your sister with her taxes. Jocelyn isn't a bad person. She just grew up in a house where everything she wanted appeared and everything I wanted got rescheduled. After a while, the pattern stops feeling unfair and starts feeling like weather. You don't fight the rain, you carry an umbrella. The ring changed that. For the first time in my life, someone had looked at me, really looked, and said, "This is yours, only yours. I chose you." Vivian Grady didn't write that in pencil. She wrote it in ink. She told her attorney. She put it in her will. She gave me the ring while she was alive and healthy, so there'd be no question. If I let my father take it, if I smiled and handed it over and told myself it was just jewelry, I wouldn't just lose the ring. I'd lose the one piece of proof that someone in my family saw me. And I'd set a precedent. Whatever Myra has, Myra can be told to give up. Easter morning. I got dressed, put on a light blue blouse Grandma Vivian had bought me 2 Christmases ago, and slipped the ring into the small zippered pocket of my purse. The sapphire fit in my palm like a river stone, smooth, heavy for its size, familiar. The drive to my parents' house took 22 minutes. Granville in April smells like wet grass, and someone's charcoal grill warming up too early. I parked on the street behind Uncle Ray's pickup truck. The house was already full. 18 people. My parents, Jocelyn and Trevor, Uncle Ray, Aunt Carol, 4 cousins, their spouses, 2 older kids, and Mrs. Dawson, the elderly neighbor Grandma Vivian used to bring casseroles to. The dining table stretched the full length of the room, set with the good china and cloth napkins my mother saves for holidays. "Myra!" My mother met me at the door. She hugged me, tight, warm, the kind of hug that made me want to believe everything was fine. "I'm glad you came," she said, and she smiled, the kind of smile that has an agenda behind it. I set my purse on the kitchen counter, next to the bread basket and the deviled eggs. Habit. I always left it there at family dinners. Everyone knew that. In the dining room, Jocelyn sat at the center of the table, Trevor beside her. Her engagement ring caught the overhead light every time she moved her hand, and she moved her hand a lot. My mother orbited around her like a satellite, refilling her glass, adjusting her napkin, asking about the florist. At the head of the table, Grandma Vivian's chair sat empty. No one had moved it. No one sat in it. The cushion was still creased. My father stood by the window. He looked at my purse on the counter. Then he looked away. Then he looked back. We sat down to eat. My father said grace. He mentioned Grandma Vivian. Mom would have loved seeing this family together. And his eyes drifted to Jocelyn as he said it. Not to me. Not to the empty chair. The first 15 minutes belonged to Jocelyn. My mother asked about the wedding venue. Jocelyn described a restored barn outside Columbus, exposed beams, string lights, room for 120. My mother asked about the dress. Jocelyn described lace sleeves and a chapel train. My mother asked about the colors, sage and ivory. Nobody asked me anything. My cousin Derek tried. "How's work, Myra?" he said, reaching for the rolls. I opened my mouth to answer, and my mother cut in. "Jocelyn, tell them about the florist situation. It's such a story." Jocelyn launched into a 10-minute saga about peonies versus garden roses. I passed the rolls. I refilled my water. I ate my ham in silence. From the far end of the table, Uncle Ray watched me. He was 64, retired, the kind of man who built things with his hands and said what he meant in as few words as possible. He was Grandma Vivian's younger brother. Same jaw, same steady gaze. When he caught my eye, he gave a small nod. Not a greeting, something closer to acknowledgement. I nodded back. The meal wound on. Trevor told a joke about his insurance clients. Aunt Carol complimented the glaze on the ham. The 2 older kids excused themselves to the backyard. Normal Easter, normal family. Except I kept noticing my father's eyes. They weren't on Jocelyn. They weren't on the food. They kept drifting, slow, casual, deliberate, to the kitchen counter, to my purse, every few minutes, like he was checking to make sure it was still there. After the main course, everyone drifted. Jocelyn and Trevor moved to the living room couch. Aunt Carol helped with the dishes. The cousins scattered. I stayed in the kitchen rinsing plates. The water was warm and the rhythm was mindless, and for a few minutes I almost forgot about the way my father had been looking at my purse. Then he was beside me. Richard Atwood moves quietly for a big man. He leaned against the counter 2 feet from my bag and crossed his arms. Casual, like he'd just wandered in for conversation. "You still carrying Mom's ring around?" he said. I kept rinsing. "It's in my purse, yes. Seems like a waste, sitting in a bag." "It's not a waste, it's where I keep it." He watched me for a long moment. The faucet ran. Steam drifted between us. "Your sister's getting married in 4 months," he said. "Something old, something borrowed. You know how it goes." "Jocelyn has a beautiful engagement ring," I said. "She doesn't need mine." "It's not about need, it's about family." I turned off the faucet, dried my hands on the dish towel, looked at him. "Dad, I've already answered this, more than once." He held my gaze for 3 seconds. Then he pushed off the counter and walked out of the kitchen without another word. I stood there, dish towel in my hands, watching his back disappear into the hallway. That look. I recognize it now. It was calculation. He wasn't making conversation. He was confirming the ring was there, confirming the purse was accessible, confirming I hadn't locked it in my car or left it at home. I answered his question. I just didn't know I was giving him coordinates. I dried the last dish and walked into the living room. The house had settled into that lazy post-meal hum. Half-empty glasses, quiet laughter, someone's kid playing a game on a tablet in the corner. I almost missed it. My mother was sitting next to Jocelyn on the love seat, leaned in close. Their heads were nearly touching. Donna's hand rested on Jocelyn's knee. I caught the tail end of a whisper. 4 words, clear as a bell. "Your father will handle it." Jocelyn looked up, saw me. Her expression shifted, quick, practiced, seamless. She sat back and smiled. "So, Myra, are you seeing anyone?" The question landed like a card laid face up on a poker table. Not curiosity, reminder. You're not engaged, you don't need the ring. "I'm fine, Jocelyn, thanks." My mother smoothed her skirt. "It's just such a shame that ring doesn't get to be part of something special." I looked at her. Grandma giving it to me was special enough. The silence that followed had weight. My mother's jaw tightened. Jocelyn glanced at Trevor, who was scrolling his phone and hadn't heard a thing. From the dining room, I heard Uncle Ray cough. The kind of cough that might have been clearing his throat, or might have been covering a reaction. "Your father will handle it." The words replayed in my head as I sat down in the armchair by the window. Handle what? Handle me? Handle the ring? I told myself I was reading too much into it. Mothers whisper to daughters all the time. It didn't have to mean anything. But my stomach knew. The way your stomach always knows before your brain catches up. Something was about to happen, and I was sitting right in the middle of it. So at this point, I'm sitting in my parents' living room, surrounded by family, and I can feel something building. My father just confirmed where the ring was. My mother just whispered to my sister that Dad would handle it. And I'm still sitting there thinking, they wouldn't actually take it. Not here, not at Easter. If you've ever sat in a room full of people who are supposed to love you and felt the air shift, you know exactly what that moment is. Stay with me. What happens next? I still can't believe it happened in front of everyone. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, leaned against the sink. My reflection looked tired, not sleepy tired. The kind of tired that comes from holding still when every nerve in your body is telling you to move. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and opened my purse. I'd grabbed it on the way down the hall, an instinct I didn't question. The ring was still in the zippered pocket. I touched the velvet pouch. Still there. Okay. Next to it, tucked into the card slot, was Margaret Hale's business card. Cream card stock. Simple black font. Margaret A. Hale, Esquire. Estate planning and probate. The card had been in my wallet for 2 years, ever since the day the will was read. I remembered what Margaret said when she handed it to me. If anything ever happens with the ring, you call me. And I remembered what she said after that, quieter, almost to herself. Your grandmother was the sharpest woman I ever knew. She didn't leave things to chance. I ran my thumb across the raised lettering. Margaret had been Grandma Vivian's best friend for 40 years. They met at a church fundraiser in 1983 and never stopped talking. Every Tuesday afternoon, without fail, Vivian drove to Margaret's office and they drank tea and reviewed whatever Vivian wanted to review, her will, her accounts, her plans. Grandma Vivian was methodical. She filed her taxes in January. She changed her smoke detector batteries on the first of every month. She updated her will every time something significant happened. And she told Margaret to give me that card. I put the card back, zipped the purse shut, looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't know yet what she'd left with Margaret beyond the will, but I was starting to understand that Vivian Grady had planned further ahead than any of us realized. I stepped out onto the back porch for air. The sun was going down behind the tree line, and the yard smelled like damp mulch and the tail end of someone's charcoal. A wind chime. Grandma Vivian had given my mother years ago hung from the eave, turning slowly without a sound. Uncle Ray was sitting in the porch rocker, a bottle of Yuengling resting on his knee. He didn't look surprised to see me. He rarely looked surprised by anything. "You wearing Vivian's ring today?" he asked. Casual, like he was asking about the weather. "It's in my purse. I was going to put it on after dinner." He nodded, took a slow sip, stared out at the yard. "Your grandma talked to me about that ring," he said. "Talked to me about a lot of things, actually, toward the end." I sat down on the porch step. "What kind of things?" "About what your daddy tried to do." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Ray set his beer down. He looked at me the way Grandma Vivian used to. Straight on, no flinching. "She told me Richard came to her house, sat at her kitchen table, told her to rewrite her will, wanted the ring going to Jocelyn through him, wanted to be the one who decided." "When was this?" "About a year before she passed. She said no." He raised his voice. "She asked him to leave." I stared at him. "She never told me that." "She didn't want to worry you, but she told Margaret, wrote it all down." He picked up his beer again. "Your grandmother wasn't the forgiving type, Myra. She was the documenting type." Before I could ask anything else, my mother's voice carried through the screen door. "Dessert's ready? Everyone inside." Ray stood up slowly. He looked at me one more time. "If something happens tonight, ask Margaret." We gathered around the table again. Donna brought out pecan pie, Grandma Vivian's recipe. Same brown sugar crust, same toasted pecans arranged in concentric circles. My mother had been making it every Easter since Vivian taught her, and she always mentioned it. "Mom always made this," Donna said, setting the pie at the center of the table. She smoothed the edge of the dish. "I just follow her recipe. Some things should stay in the family." She looked at me when she said that last part. Not long, just long enough. Aunt Carol cut the first slice. Plates went around. The conversation shifted to Jocelyn's wedding again. The guest list, the seating chart, the honeymoon. One of the cousins' wives asked to see Jocelyn's engagement ring. Jocelyn held out her hand, beaming. "Is that the family ring?" the cousin asked. Jocelyn laughed. "Not yet, but hopefully soon." My mother laughed with her. A small laugh, the kind that carries a promise. I set my fork down, looked across the table at Uncle Ray. He was watching my father. Richard stood up from his chair. "I need more coffee," he said. He pushed back from the table and walked toward the kitchen. The coffee maker was on the left counter. My purse was on the right. My father walked to the right. I felt it before I understood it. That cold drop in my stomach. The one that comes when your body recognizes danger a full second before your brain catches up. I turned in my chair, watched his back, watched his hands. He didn't go for coffee. The coffee maker sat untouched on the opposite counter, the red light still blinking. My father was standing in front of my purse, and his hand was already on the zipper. He didn't rush. That's what I remember most. Richard Atwood unzipped my purse like he was reaching for his own wallet. Calm. Practiced. Like he'd rehearsed the motion. His hand went into the zippered pocket. He pulled out the velvet pouch. Opened it. The sapphire caught the overhead kitchen light. A flash of deep blue, there and gone. Then he walked back into the dining room. 18 people at the table. Every head turned. He crossed to Jocelyn's chair, held the ring out in his open palm. "This belongs with someone who'll use it," he said. Jocelyn looked at the ring, looked at our father, didn't look at me. She picked it up, slid it onto her right hand, smiled. "Thanks, Dad." My mother set down her coffee cup. "See?" she said. "That's how family works." 18 people. Aunt Carol, Uncle Ray, Derek and his wife, Mrs. Dawson, Trevor, the cousins, the kids peeking in from the hallway. Every single one of them watched my father open my purse, take my property, and hand it to my sister. Nobody said a word. I stood up. My chair scraped the hardwood. The sound cut through the silence like a crack in glass. I looked at Jocelyn's hand. Grandma Vivian's sapphire on a finger that had no right to it. I looked at my mother, who was smiling. I looked at my father, who was standing with his arms folded, jaw set, like he'd just fixed a leaky pipe. Then I looked at Grandma Vivian's chair. Empty, cushions still creased. And I heard her voice, not mystical, not ghostly, just memory, clear as Tuesday afternoon coffee. "If someone takes what's yours, and no one stops them, you call Margaret." I didn't scream. I didn't lunge across the table. I didn't grab my sister's hand and pry the ring off her finger, though every muscle in my body pulled toward it. I stood still, let the silence hold. 18 people stared at me, waiting. My mother's smile had frozen in place. She was ready for tears, ready for a scene, ready for the version of Myra who would cry and then apologize and then drive home and swallow it whole. That version of me had retired about 30 seconds ago. I walked to the kitchen counter. My purse was still open, zipper gaping like a wound. I reached inside, past the slot where the velvet pouch used to sit, and pulled out Margaret Hale's business card. Cream cardstock, black font. The edges were soft from 2 years in my wallet. I picked up my phone, walked to the back porch. The screen door banged shut behind me. My father's voice followed me. "Where are you going?" I didn't turn around. "I'm making a phone call." Behind me, silence. The kind of silence that happens when someone does the one thing nobody planned for. I dialed Margaret's number. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. Everything inside me was shaking. But my hands and my voice had decided they weren't going to participate in that. 3 rings. "Myra?" Margaret's voice was calm, alert, like she'd been waiting by the phone. "He took it," I said. My father took the ring from my purse and gave it to Jocelyn, in front of everyone. A pause. One breath. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Margaret said. "Don't leave that house." I hung up, turned around. Through the screen door I could see the dining room. My father was still standing, but he wasn't smiling anymore. I stepped back inside. The screen door closed softly behind me. Every head in the dining room swiveled. "Someone's coming," I said. My mother stood up. "What do you mean someone's coming? Who did you call?" "Grandma's attorney." The word landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. I watched the ripples hit each face. Confusion from the cousins, alarm from Aunt Carol, blank silence from Mrs. Dawson. And my father. Richard Atwood's face changed the way a landscape changes when clouds move in. The confidence drained out of it. His arms unfolded. His hands found the back of a chair, and he gripped it. "You called a lawyer," he said. "Over a ring." "Over Grandma's ring," I said. "Yes." "This is a family matter, Myra." "Then the family shouldn't have stolen from me." Jocelyn's hand drifted to the sapphire on her finger. She twisted it. For the first time since she'd put it on, she didn't look pleased. She looked uncertain. Trevor set his phone down. His eyes moved between Jocelyn and me, then to Richard, then back. He was calculating, the way insurance people calculate: risk, liability, exposure. My mother sat back down. This is ridiculous. We're making a scene. Dad made the scene, Mom. I'm just responding to it. From the far end of the table, Uncle Ray hadn't moved. He sat with his hands folded, watching. When Richard's eyes swept the room looking for support, they landed on Ray. Ray looked back at him, didn't blink, didn't nod. The clock on the wall ticked. Forks lay abandoned on dessert plates. The pecan pie sat half-eaten, Grandma Vivian's recipe going cold on the table she used to sit at. 20 minutes. Margaret was 20 minutes away. Nobody left the table. The longest 20 minutes of my life played out in that dining room. My father paced, kitchen to window, window to hallway, back again. He kept his hands in his pockets, but I could see them moving, fists opening and closing, working through something he couldn't say out loud. "You're blowing this out of proportion," Donna said. She was using her church voice, soft, measured, the one she used when she wanted to sound reasonable while saying something unreasonable. "It's Easter. Can we just be a family?" "We were a family 20 minutes ago," I said. Then Dad went through my purse. Jocelyn hadn't spoken. She sat with her hands in her lap, the sapphire hidden beneath the table. Trevor leaned over and whispered something. She shook her head. My cousin Derek stood and walked to the kitchen. He came back with water, set a glass in front of me without a word. His wife gave him a look. He shrugged. Richard stopped pacing, pointed at me. "Call her back. Tell her not to come." "No." "Myra." "No, Dad." From his chair, Uncle Ray spoke for the first time. His voice was low and even and carried across the table without effort. "Let her come." Every head turned. Richard's jaw tightened. "Stay out of this, Ray." "Vivian was my sister." Ray picked up his empty beer bottle and set it down again, deliberate as a gavel. "I'm not staying out of anything." The room went quiet again. The clock ticked. Mrs. Dawson folded her napkin into smaller and smaller squares. One of the kids appeared in the doorway, sensed the temperature, and backed away. Then, gravel crunching under tires. A car pulling into the driveway. A door opening and closing. Footsteps on the porch. A knock. I opened the door. Margaret Hale stood on the porch in a gray wool cardigan, her silver hair pinned neatly. She was 72, thin, upright, the kind of woman who could silence a courtroom by adjusting her glasses. She carried a manila envelope under her arm, thick, sealed with a metal clasp. She looked at me. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. They're in the dining room." She nodded once and walked inside. I followed. When Margaret stepped into the dining room, 18 pairs of eyes locked onto her. She scanned the table the way a surgeon scans an operating field, methodical, unhurried, missing nothing. Her gaze landed on Jocelyn's hand, on the sapphire. Then she turned to my father. "Richard." Her voice carried no warmth and no hostility, pure professional gravity. "I'd hoped your mother was wrong about you." My father squared his shoulders. "This is a family matter, Margaret." "I am family, Richard. Your mother made sure of that." She set the manila envelope on the table between the half-eaten pecan pie and the stack of dessert plates. The clasp clicked when she opened it. Inside, a notarized copy of Grandma Vivian's will and a single sealed envelope, cream-colored, Vivian's handwriting on the front. Margaret placed both documents side by side. She folded her hands. "Before I read this," she said, addressing the room, "I want everyone here to understand something clearly. The ring Jocelyn is currently wearing is the legal property of Myra Atwood. It was given to her as a personal gift 4 years ago and confirmed as her sole property in Vivian Grady's last will and testament. Removing it from Myra's purse without her consent is theft under Ohio Revised Code." Donna's hand went to her mouth. Jocelyn looked at her father. Richard said nothing. Margaret picked up the sealed envelope. Vivian wrote this letter 14 months before she passed, Margaret said. She held it up so the room could see. Vivian's handwriting, slanted, precise, the penmanship of a woman who wrote letters her entire life. She was lucid. She had her physician sign a competency statement the same day. That statement is attached. She broke the seal, unfolded a single page, and read. If you're reading this, it means Richard took the ring. The room stopped breathing. I knew he would. He came to my house 3 times in the last year asking me to change my will. He wanted the ring to go to Jocelyn, not because Jocelyn wanted it, but because he wanted to be the one to give it. He wanted to decide. That's all it's ever been about with Richard. Not love, not tradition, control. My mother pressed her napkin to her eyes. Jocelyn's face had gone white. I chose Myra because Myra never asked for anything. She showed up, she sat with me, she listened. She earned this ring not by wanting it, but by being the kind of person who keeps what matters. Margaret paused. The only sound was the clock. Richard, if you're hearing this, I love you, but you were never entitled to decide for me. Not while I was alive. And not after I'm gone. Margaret folded the letter, set it on the table. The room was silent in the way that only rooms full of people who've just heard something irreversible can be silent. I looked at my father. His face was the color of ash. His hands gripped the chair back so hard his knuckles had gone white. My mother was crying, quietly, the way she cries when she can't spin it. Grandma Vivian, dead 2 years, had just walked back into the room and said exactly what she meant. My father found his voice. It came out thin. She was confused toward the end. She didn't know what she was writing. Margaret didn't blink. Vivian wrote this letter when she was 78 years old. She drove herself to my office. She sat across from me for an hour and a half. She dictated portions and wrote others by hand. Her doctor, Dr. Alan Fisk, whom several of you know, signed the competency statement that afternoon. It's the second page in the envelope. Richard opened his mouth, closed it. Uncle Ray stood up. The chair scraped. The room turned. She told me too, Richard. Ray's voice was steady, measured, the voice of a man who'd been holding this for 2 years and had finally been given permission to set it down. 2 Christmases ago, I went over to check on her furnace. She told me you'd come to her kitchen table and demanded she rewrite her will. She said you raised your voice. She said she asked you to leave. That's not what— I was there, Richard. I was in the next room when you came back a second time. I heard every word. She told you no, and you called her stubborn. You called your own mother stubborn because she wouldn't hand over what was hers. The room was motionless. Aunt Carol had her hand over her chest. Derek stared at his plate. Mrs. Dawson, 80 years old, Grandma Vivian's neighbor for 3 decades, shook her head slowly, back and forth, like a pendulum winding down. My father looked around the table, searching for an ally, for someone to push back, to say Ray was exaggerating, to defend him. He found nothing. Every face either looked away or looked straight through him. Donna reached for his arm. He pulled away. Margaret turned to my sister. Jocelyn, I need you to return the ring to Myra. Jocelyn sat frozen. Her eyes darted to our father, waiting, the way she'd waited her whole life, for him to tell her what to do next. Richard said nothing. He was staring at the floor. My mother pressed her napkin harder against her eyes. No words came. It was Trevor who moved first. He reached over gently and took Jocelyn's right hand. She didn't resist. He slid the sapphire off her finger, carefully, the way you'd handle something that didn't belong to you, and set it on the table in front of me. I didn't know, Myra, Trevor said quietly, about any of this. I'm sorry. I picked up the ring. The sapphire was warm from Jocelyn's hand. I slid it onto my right ring finger where it had always sat, where Grandma Vivian had placed it 4 years ago. Margaret straightened the documents on the table. One more thing, she said. Vivian also instructed me to inform you all. If the ring is removed from Myra's possession again, I am authorized to file a police report for theft and conversion of personal property. This is not a threat. It's her wish. The room absorbed that. Nobody argued. Nobody scoffed. I looked at the empty chair. The cushion still creased. And for 1 second, just one, I could swear I felt it. That quiet, steady presence. The smell of coffee and gardenia hand lotion. A nod that said, "Good girl. You kept your promise." My father sank into his chair. My mother stared at the tablecloth. Jocelyn's hands sat empty in her lap. The pecan pie was cold. Grandma Vivian's recipe. Untouched. Easter was over. So there I am, sitting at my parents' Easter table, ring back on my hand, my grandmother's letter still echoing off the walls. My father won't look at me. My mother is staring at the tablecloth. And my sister, for the first time in 28 years, has nothing to say. If you've ever had someone reach out from beyond and defend you when no one in the room would, you know what that feels like. I need to tell you what happened after that dinner, because the fallout didn't stop at that table. I stood up. I didn't slam anything. I didn't point fingers. I just stood in my parents' dining room with my grandmother's ring on my hand and said what needed saying. I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen. The room was still. I looked at my father first. Dad, you went into my purse and took my property, in front of everyone at this table. Then my mother. Mom, you helped plan it. Your father will handle it. I heard you. Then Jocelyn. Jocelyn, you put it on and said thank you. You didn't ask me. You didn't hesitate. My sister's chin trembled. My mother's hands twisted the napkin in her lap. My father's eyes stayed on the floor. I love this family, I said. But love doesn't mean I let you take what's mine. It doesn't mean I smile while someone opens my bag and hands away the only thing my grandmother left me. I picked up my purse, put on my jacket. I won't be coming to Sunday dinners for a while, not because I'm angry, because I need space, and because you need to think about something, whether you want a relationship with me or just access to what I have. My father looked up. You're overreacting. Grandma didn't think so, I said. She wrote a whole letter about it. I walked to the front door. Margaret was already on the porch, envelope under her arm, waiting with the patient stillness of a woman who'd done this kind of work for 40 years. Behind me I heard Donna say, "She'll calm down." I didn't turn around. I stepped off the porch and into the evening air. The sky was pink and dark blue and the wind chime turned slowly and said nothing. I was done calming down. We stood by Margaret's car in the driveway. The house glowed behind us, warm lights, the shadow of people still sitting at the table. Nobody had come outside. Nobody had followed me. Margaret reached into her car and handed me a second envelope. This one was smaller. My name was on the front in Grandma Vivian's handwriting. The same slanted script, the same firm letters. "There's one more thing Vivian left you," Margaret said. "A personal letter, just for you. She told me to give it to you after the ring was safe." I turned the envelope over. It was sealed with a piece of clear tape, the way Grandma Vivian sealed everything, neat and deliberate. I opened it there, in the driveway, under the porch light. The letter was short, half a page. Her handwriting got smaller toward the end, the way it always did when she was concentrating. "Myra, if you're reading this, you did the right thing. You kept your promise. I always knew you would. The ring is yours, but more importantly, your voice is yours. Don't ever let anyone take that from you. Love, Grandma." I read it twice. Then I folded it and pressed it against my chest and cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just the kind of crying that happens when someone you lost reaches across the distance and says exactly what you needed to hear. Margaret put her hand on my shoulder. "She talked about you every time we met," she said. "Every Tuesday. You were her favorite part of the week." I wiped my eyes, looked at the ring on my hand, looked at the letter. "Thank you, Margaret." "Don't thank me. Thank your grandmother. She planned this better than most people plan their retirement." I almost laughed. Almost. I was about to get in my car when the front door opened. Uncle Ray stepped out, pulling his jacket on with one hand, holding his truck keys in the other. He walked to me slowly. The porch light caught the lines on his face, deep ones, the kind that come from years of working outdoors and squinting against the sun. He looked like Grandma Vivian when the light hit him right, same cheekbones, same set to the mouth. "I should have said something sooner," he said. "Years ago, when he first went to her house. I should have stood up then." "You stood up tonight, Uncle Ray. That's what mattered." He shook his head. "I watched my sister get pushed around by her own son. I saw it happening and I told myself it wasn't my place." He stopped, swallowed. "That's the worst excuse there is." "She didn't blame you. She never mentioned it to me." "That's because she handled it herself, same as she always did." He looked at the ring on my hand. "Your grandmother would have been proud of you in there." "She would have been proud of you too." His eyes went red. He blinked it away, quick, practiced, the way men of his generation do. Then he pulled me into a hug, brief, tight, the kind that says everything in 3 seconds. "You need anything," he said, stepping back. "You call me. Not next week, not when it's convenient. You call." "I will." He nodded, walked to his truck, started the engine, pulled out slow, the way he does everything. I got into my car, ring on my hand, letter on the passenger seat, Margaret's taillights disappearing down the road ahead of me. I drove home alone, but the passenger seat didn't feel empty. The calls started the next morning. My mother called 4 times before noon. I let everyone go to voicemail. She left 2 messages, the first one tearful, the second one sharp. By evening, the text started. "You embarrassed your father in front of his whole family." I typed back. "He embarrassed himself, Mom." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then nothing. Aunt Carol called that evening. Her voice was gentle, careful, the way people talk when they know they're stepping into something fragile. "I didn't know, sweetheart. About the will, about what Richard did to Vivian. None of us knew. I want you to know. I'm on your side. Derek, too." I thanked her. I meant it. Jocelyn's text arrived the next day. Brief, measured. I could tell she'd drafted it multiple times. "I didn't know Dad was going to do that." I read it twice, then replied, "You put the ring on, Jocelyn. You knew it wasn't yours." No response. My father didn't call, didn't text. Radio silence from Richard Atwood, the kind of silence that feels louder than shouting. He'd been exposed in front of his family, his mother's words hanging in the room like smoke that wouldn't clear, and he had absolutely nothing to say. By Wednesday, the family had quietly rearranged itself. Aunt Carol and 2 of my cousins were checking in on me regularly. They'd stopped calling Richard and Donna. Not dramatically. No announcements, no speeches. They just stopped calling. Donna noticed. She texted Aunt Carol. "I don't understand why everyone's taking sides." Carol replied, "Nobody's taking sides, Donna. We're just paying attention." That text circulated through the family like wildfire. I didn't send it to anyone. I didn't have to. The truth had its own legs. 1 week after Easter, Jocelyn showed up at my apartment. No call, no text, just a knock at 7:30 on a Tuesday evening. I opened the door. She was wearing the gray cardigan I'd given her for Christmas. Her eyes were swollen. She'd been crying, the real kind, not the performative kind she'd learned from our mother. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She sat on the edge of my couch like she might need to leave quickly. "I want you to know," she said. "I didn't ask Dad to take it." "I know you didn't ask him, Jocelyn." Then, "But you didn't stop him. He put it in your hand and you slid it on and said, 'Thanks, Dad.' You didn't look at me. You didn't say, 'Wait, is this Myra's?' You just took it." She pressed her palms against her eyes. I thought Grandma would have wanted. Grandma wrote it in her will. She wrote a letter. She told Uncle Ray. She told her attorney." I kept my voice steady, level. "How many times does a dead woman have to say no before this family hears it?" Jocelyn's shoulders shook. She cried the way she cried when she was little, head down, hiccuping, unable to catch her breath. I'm sorry, Myra. I'm really sorry. I believed her. I sat down across from her and let the silence hold. I know you're sorry, I said. But sorry doesn't undo what happened at that table. It doesn't undo 30 years of me being second. It doesn't undo Dad going through my purse while everyone watched. She nodded. She didn't argue. I want us to be okay, she said. I do too, but that's going to take time. And it starts with you seeing what happened, really seeing it. She left 20 minutes later. I closed the door and leaned against it. Trevor called me 3 days later. I didn't expect it. I'd always thought of him as background, pleasant, polite, the kind of man who holds your coat and doesn't ask complicated questions. I'd underestimated him. I want you to know something, he said. His voice was measured but firm. What your dad did was wrong. I told Jocelyn that. I appreciate you saying so, Trevor. There's more. I told Jocelyn I don't want her parents involved in the wedding planning anymore. Not after what I saw at that dinner. I sat down. That's a big decision. It's the right one. Your dad opened someone else's bag in front of 30. What was it, 18 people? And just took something. Then your mom acted like it was normal. I can't have that energy around our wedding, around our life. That's between you and Jocelyn. I know. But I wanted you to hear it from me. He paused. Your grandmother's letter changed how I see this family. I always thought your parents were strict but fair. Now I know they're strict and selective. Strict and selective. I turned the phrase over. It was accurate. Painfully accurate. One more thing, Trevor said. I'm sorry I didn't do anything at the table. When it happened, I sat there with my phone like an idiot. You returned the ring, Trevor. You were the one who took it off her finger and gave it back. That counts. It should have counted sooner. We hung up. I put my phone on the counter and looked out the window. Trevor didn't owe me anything. He was marrying into this family, not out of it. But he'd seen what he saw, and he'd made his own choice. And in doing so, he'd taken something from my father that Richard valued more than any ring: influence over his daughter's wedding. 3 weeks passed. My phone rang on a Wednesday evening. The screen said Dad. I stared at it for 4 rings before I picked up. Your mother thinks we should talk, he said. His voice sounded tired, not apologetic, tired. The voice of a man who'd spent 3 weeks in a house where the phone stopped ringing and the invitations stopped coming. What do you want to say, Dad? Long pause. I could hear the television in the background. A baseball game, volume low. The sound of a house that used to be full and isn't anymore. I shouldn't have gone through your purse. I waited. He didn't continue. That's a start, I said. But you also need to say that the ring is mine, and that Grandma's wishes matter. Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear him fighting with himself. The version of Richard who knows he was wrong wrestling with the version who spent 61 years believing he's the head of the table. It was your grandmother's decision, he said finally. Each word sounded like it cost him something. It's the closest you've come to acknowledging that. Thank you. So are you coming to dinner Sunday? Not yet, Dad. I'm not ready. How long? I don't know, but I'll let you know when I am. Silence. Then, very quietly. Okay. Click. I set my phone down, looked at the ring. The sapphire caught the kitchen light the way it always does, that deep, quiet blue, steady as a held breath. He hadn't apologized. Not really. He'd acknowledged what happened the way you acknowledge a speed bump, grudgingly, without slowing down. But he'd said, your grandmother's decision. 4 words that cost a proud man more than he'd ever admit. It was a start. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. The following Saturday, I drove to Granville Cemetery. The road winds through farmland, flat, green, the kind of Ohio spring that smells like turned earth and new grass. Vivian Grady is buried next to her husband Frank, under an old maple tree that's been there longer than either of them. I brought yellow tulips, her favorite. She used to plant them along the south side of her house every October. pressing the bulbs into the dirt with her bare hands because she said gloves made her clumsy. I set the tulips against the headstone and sat on the grass. The ring was on my hand. The sunlight moved through the sapphire and threw a faint blue shadow across the stone. "I kept it, Grandma," I said. "Like you asked." A cardinal landed on the maple branch above me, cocked its head, stayed. It wasn't easy, but I kept it. I called Margaret. She came. She read your letter. I smiled. "You really did plan everything, didn't you?" The wind moved through the grass. The tulips leaned into it. "Dad's not there yet. He might never be. But Uncle Ray came through. He said what you told him. He stood up." I looked at the ring, turned it on my finger. 40 years of Grandma Vivian's life shaped into that thin gold band. Great-grandma's before her, mine now. "You said you gave me this ring because I'm the kind of person who keeps things," I said. "You were right. I kept the ring." I pressed my hand against the grass, felt the earth underneath, cool, solid, permanent. But what I really kept was my voice. The cardinal sang once and flew. The tulips held their ground. I stood up, brushed off my knees, drove home, alone, but not lonely. Not anymore. 6 months after Easter, my life looked different, not dramatically different. The apartment was the same. The job was the same. The ring was still on my hand every morning when I poured my coffee. But the architecture of my family had shifted. Uncle Ray and I started having dinner together every Thursday. His house, a small ranch he'd built himself off Route 661, smelled like sawdust and the cast-iron skillet he used for everything. Over meatloaf and green beans, he told me stories about Grandma Vivian I'd never heard. How she'd once driven through a snowstorm to deliver a casserole to a neighbor she didn't even like. How she'd told Grandpa Frank, on their second date, that she would never change her last name, and he'd said, "Then I'll just have to marry a Grady." These Thursday dinners became the part of my week I looked forward to most. Jocelyn and I started meeting for coffee, once a month, a neutral cafe in Westerville, halfway between her place and mine. No parents, no Trevor, just us. The conversations were careful at first, weather, work, safe topics. But by the 3rd month, she asked me about Grandma Vivian's last year. What it was like, what they talked about. Things Jocelyn had never asked before because she'd never been there to see. My mother still texted on Sundays. Some messages were genuine. "Hope you had a good week." Some were guilt trips. "Your father misses you at the table." I answered the first kind. I left the second kind on read. Richard Atwood never mentioned the ring again, not once. Whether that meant acceptance or avoidance, I couldn't tell. But the ring stayed on my hand, and he stopped pretending it shouldn't be there. I didn't cut my family off. I just stopped letting them cut into me. Jocelyn married Trevor on a Saturday in October. The restored barn outside Columbus, exposed beams, string lights, everything she'd described at that Easter table 5 months earlier. 60 guests, a string quartet, sage and ivory everywhere. I wore a navy dress and Grandma Vivian's sapphire ring. Jocelyn walked down the aisle on my mother's arm. My father walked beside them, but slightly behind, a half step back, a position Trevor had quietly insisted on. Richard Atwood at his daughter's wedding, present, but not leading. It was a small adjustment. It said everything. Jocelyn wore Trevor's ring, a classic solitaire diamond, no sapphire, no heirloom, her own ring, chosen by the man she chose. I sat in the 3rd row, not the front, not the back, a position I chose for myself. When Jocelyn walked past my row, she turned her head, caught my eye, gave a small nod, the kind of nod that carries weight when it comes from someone who used to take things for granted. I nodded back. No hug, no tears, just acknowledgement. After the ceremony, Aunt Carol found me at the cocktail hour. She had a glass of champagne in each hand and gave me one without asking. "Vivian would have loved this," she said. I looked at the string lights, the beams, the people laughing. I felt the ring on my finger, warm from the evening air, solid. "She's here," I said. Carol clinked her glass against mine. We drank. The October air was crisp, and the barn glowed, and somewhere inside, a string quartet played something I almost recognized. I didn't need to be the center of Jocelyn's wedding. I didn't need to prove anything. I just needed to be there on my own terms, with my grandmother's ring on my hand and my own voice in my chest. That was enough. So here's what I want to say to you, and I'm saying it as someone who spent most of her life getting it wrong. If you're the person in your family who always gives in, I understand. It's easier, it's faster, and sometimes it feels like love. You tell yourself that keeping the peace is the same as being a good daughter, a good sister, a good person. It's not. There is a difference between keeping the peace and losing yourself. I confused those two things for a very long time. I thought that if I just stayed quiet, if I just let it go, if I just handed over whatever they asked for, eventually they'd see me. Eventually they'd say, "You know what, Myra? You matter too." They never said it. Not once. Not until a 79-year-old woman sat me down at a kitchen table and put a ring in my hand and said, "This is for someone who keeps things." My grandmother saw it before I did. She gave me that ring not just as a gift, but as a question. Could I keep something that was mine, even when everyone told me to let it go? The answer turned out to be yes. But it took a phone call, an attorney, and a letter from beyond the grave to get there. You might not have a Margaret Hale. You might not have an Uncle Ray. But you have your own voice, and I promise you, it's louder than you think. The ring on my hand is worth maybe $1,500. It's not the Hope Diamond, but my grandmother wore it every day for 40 years, and she gave it to me because she wanted a part of her to stay with someone who'd hold on. I'm holding on, Grandma. I promise. I look at the ring sometimes, in the morning when the light hits it through the kitchen window. In the evening, when I'm grading spreadsheets at the dining table and catch a flash of blue against the white paper. It's an oval sapphire set in thin gold. The band is slightly worn on the inside from 40 years on my grandmother's hand. The stone has a tiny inclusion near the bottom. A wisp of silk, the jeweler told me, common in natural sapphires. Grandma Vivian called it the ring's fingerprint. Some days I think about what would have happened if I hadn't made that call. If I'd sat in that dining room and watched Jocelyn wear it home. If I'd told myself it was just a ring, just metal and stone, not worth the fight. But it was never just a ring. It was a decision. My grandmother decided I was worth choosing. My father decided I wasn't worth asking. And I decided, on the back porch of my parents' house, on Easter Sunday, with 18 people waiting inside, that the dead woman's decision carried more weight than the living man's entitlement. That's my story. The ring is on my hand. The letter is in my nightstand drawer. Uncle Ray comes for dinner on Thursdays. And every Tuesday, I drive out to Granville and sit with Grandma Vivian under the maple tree, the way I always did. Some promises don't end when someone dies. Some promises are just getting started. If this story reminded you of someone, a grandmother, a parent, a friend, someone who saw you when nobody else did, I'd love to hear about them. Drop a comment. Tell me their name. And if you know someone who's being told to give up something that's rightfully theirs, whether it's a ring, a boundary, or their own voice, send them this video. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step. There are more stories like mine in the description below. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.